thin on saxophone? Do you ever feel you're playing and your sound is just not where you want it to be? It's not thick enough, it's not round enough. You just play for years and you just don't know what to do to improve your sound. My name is Lorenzo Ferrero. I'm a Latin Grammy Award-winning and Grammy-nominated saxophonist, composer, and arranger. And one of the things that I do every Tuesday is I post a little tutorial like this where I help saxophone players, arrangers, composers, and improvisers all over the world improve their skills. And in today's video, I want to talk about how you can thicken your saxophone sound and how you can avoid that overly thin sound. So how can you fix that? And I'm going to tell you this because I had that problem for years. Before I fixed it, I played very thin for at least 5 years. I just couldn't get my sound to sound round enough. And I'm going to tell you the biggest mistakes that I was doing, how to fix them, how to avoid that, and then what little exercises you can do to actually thicken your sound and sound a lot rounder on saxophone. Now, I've been doing a lot of the saxophone videos, so make sure to watch my other videos. I talk about breathing, how to sound more expressive on the saxophone, how to add more depth to your sound. So this is going to go with those videos perfectly. So make sure to watch them. I left a little card with a playlist at the end of this video. So let's get started. The main reason why people sound thin on saxophone or students sound thin on saxophone is because of a few reasons. I'm going to start by mentioning the one I had, which was really bad, okay? I was biting too much. I played clarinet before and I was biting excessively the mouthpiece. Hence, by biting, I was cutting away all my sound. I was sounding out of tune. I was sharpening my sound and I would just really sound almost like metallic and thin. Then I was not breathing properly. Even if I thought I was, you know, I really didn't train my sound with my breath. And that's something that I talk a lot more about on my other video about adding expression to your saxophone sound. So make sure to watch that one. And then the other reason is that I was sounding out of tune as well, right? So a lot of when you're sounding thin, sometimes I'm going to show you how you can just practice with the neck and you're going to get a much better tuning and roundness of your sound just by using the neck. When you start sounding out of tune, it's really hard to sound thick and to sound nice, right? Even if you sound thick, it's not going to be very well sounding. It's going to be weird because your sound is just off and out of tune. So if you kind of fix those things, then I'm going to show you a few techniques that you can do to start thickening your sound and getting that roundness that I was looking for that for years until I finally started understanding what was the things that actually produced that. So let's start with the most important one, and I always talk about it's breath and how to breathe properly, right? Again, I talk more about this on that video about adding expression to your sound, about how you can practice long tones with very, very soft, no tongue at all, and how to do the concept of just air, sound, air, and play really soft. By the way, playing really soft is actually the best way to practice enhancing your sound, because a lot of people in the saxophone world, we start playing literally from mezzo forte above. We just start and blow, and that's how we learn, and that's how we play. And you should avoid that, and you should try to always have a few minutes in your practice where you practice soft and where you consciously think about sounding round in a very soft volume, okay? So breathing is one. The one thing I talk about on that video, and I'm going to repeat in this video in case you're seeing this for the first time because it's really important, I talk about a breathing technique that is really effective that I learned from Arturo Sandoval years ago when he was visiting Berkeley and I was studying there. And he talked about when you're walking, how to, for 10 steps, you would inhale, for 10 steps, you would hold, and on the last 10 steps, you would exhale in a controlled way. And this sounds like simple, but it's actually very hard. And if you can do it sitting down, you don't need to be walking. You can just count to 10, right? Like, holding. Now, did a little fast there for the purpose of the video. But what happens here, when you inhale, you need to think about putting the air all the way to the bottom, almost to your feet, right? To really get that stomach air going, because a lot of times we are breathing in a shallow way. This is the main problem why saxophone players sound thin, because you breathe like this, and then you instantly play. And then you instantly play loud. So hence, you're trying to play strong with a sound that is not fully supported, or even badly supported with air. So first of all, it's really like if it were yoga, really analyze how much air you can put in you. Like you start with the lower part, lower stomach, everything below your diaphragm. Once that's full, you go to the middle, right where the diaphragm is, and then at the end, you just complete it with this. Even when I breathe like that, my voice even goes lower, and that's a good signal. That means I'm really full of air. Now you need to eventually replicate that amount of air with like a 1 second, right? Or even less than a second. But when you do that, what happens is you do the 10 steps or the 10 counts, then you hold it for 10. When you hold it, it's hard because you're full of air. You're like a balloon just about to like burst. Then you exhale in a controlled way. That's really hard because you're going to want to like spit it all out. And that's a lot of the reason that's what happens on the saxophone. And I see students having a harsh sound or a thin sound or just an ugly sound because they're pushing the air in an uncontrolled way. So hence sounding mushy, sounding even if accidentally, even if the sound sounds fat, it's not a good fat. It's not a sound with depth and with muscle, right? So imagine if you're in the gym, you accidentally lift something, a weight that is really heavy, but you can't really lift it. You just kind of did it and then you throw it out, right? Because you can. As opposed to actually train your muscles to actually lift it in a controlled way that you know what you're doing and you can lift it 10 times that way. That's what I want you to have, and that's all from the air support, right? From the air. Now, from there, definitely gonna ask you to check out the other video for the long tone exercise because that's like a big one of like air, sound, air. But today I want to focus on really avoiding the thin sound. Okay, so what you can do is you can breathe in this way, and on the exhaling part you can actually play. What you're gonna do is with no tongue at all, just play one note. Just see how it feels playing one note with no tongue, but with that amount of air in you, right? So I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna inhale for 10. Hold. And now I'm gonna exhale by playing a beat. Now, the idea here is not to play it too loud, to play it in a controlled way like that, mezzo piano, and no tongue at all. Now, as you're doing that, the first thing that you need to take care of is with your diaphragm. The diaphragm is a beautiful muscle right here that controls the flow of the air, right? So you need to work on, instead of like pushing all the air out, to control it, because that control is actually going to add depth to your sound. When you control it, so your diaphragm needs to be working so that it releases the air in a controlled way, not like oof, because then the note sounds shaky, right? You want to avoid that by notice how I go back to the air, right? Air, no tongue at all. No tongue is so important. A lot of people overuse the tongue in the saxophone. You need to be able to produce an effective, beautiful sound with no tongue, because that's what's going to get you the airflow in and out. This is a tube, right? The tongue is just an additional element later on to articulate, but it's not what should be producing the sound. And a lot of people use it. I blame myself too for doing this when I was starting out. You're using the tongue to push the sound out. You should not do that. Always train your sound with no tongue. Even if you don't want to do long tones, just spend 5 minutes every time tongueless, absolutely tongueless and playing soft. That by itself will become a long tone or sound exercise. You can play anything that way, right? That's number one. Breathe properly before you do anything else, because everything else will become easier. If you don't have a good airflow or good air support, everything else becomes so much harder to do, and honestly way more exhausting. When you're not breathing properly, you're going to exhaust yourself to the point where it can even be a little dangerous. You know, I've heard of people like, at some point, I know it's not very common, but some people have fainted after playing for a while, right? Just because of lack of air support. You need to work on your diaphragm. Is a muscle. It's like a bicep. It's like the core. It's like your abs. So you need to train them constantly you need to train your diaphragm constantly in order to understand how to push that air and get that control. The first thing that's gonna add depth to your sound as soon as you start doing that. Okay, that's number one. Then as you do that, a lot of things will correct themselves. For example, the biting might correct a little bit, but some other people have tension below. So how to do that? I'm here with the tenor. So if I grab the neck only, and I do the same concept of the air, I breathe properly, and I'm gonna add my breath. I'm not gonna say blow, I'm gonna put my breath right in here. I'm gonna make this sound as much as a saxophone as possible, right? That doesn't mean to explode the sound and make it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm still talking about playing relatively soft. Maybe you can do a little crescendo to mezzo forte, but this neck needs to sound round as possible. And I never did this until later on. A teacher at Berkeley showed it to me, and it's like made me work on this. What happens with this? Now with the tenor, it needs to be a concert E natural, right? E natural. Now I was playing back then when I did this the first time. I was playing an F. It should be right. I'm gonna play an E here on the piano. So F sharp for your, if you're in B flat transposition, E natural. Right? For me, when I was starting, I was playing an F. What did that mean? I was biting excessively to the point where I would dig a hole in my mouthpiece, and that translated to the rest of the horn. That's why I was sounding super thin. Now, thankfully, most of my students never had that problem. That was just me having that problem. I really worked on this. But if you grab this and you work with no tongue and just really focus on making this sound as round as possible. One thing that I like to think of is, rather than thinking your sound going just in front of you, think about your sound going left and right, even when playing soft. So just imagine your sound opening up like this. That's going to naturally make you put more air. Before you do anything weird with your embouchure, really play with your air and your diaphragm. Look. So when I do that, I feel a lot of things going on, because this is like a very tiny saxophone. So a lot of tension will get accented, right? A lot of things that then later you put it on here and then there's less tension. But here there's a lot of tension going on. It's a very small, tiny saxophone. It's like playing a really high note. So it's hard. So do it with that. Just do it for a little bit. Make sure you get a nice, beautiful concert E on green, right? And if you're getting too sharp, before you start moving the mouthpiece around because I'm sharp or flat, this is okay, but you need to understand that a lot of it comes from your embouchure as well, okay? Don't just blame this, guys. For example, I don't even have a set place I put this. I kind of adjust it depending on the weather, on what's going on. But I know I can still play in tune because I can control everything with my air and my embouchure, right? Then once you put it on, you're going to grab a note again, and now you're going to think that it's going to go left and right, not just in front, right? Now, that was with good air support. Now, what I did there is, I imagine there's a person sitting like, I don't know, maybe 4 meters at my right, and that's the actual listener. So instead of somebody in front of me, how does that person listen to me? I want my sound to really travel, right? So air. Then once your air is good, then there's a lot of other things that you can do. I talked in another video, the yawning effect of placing your throat like if you're yawning, right? And that's going to warm up your sound a little bit. And then the other thing that I do a lot, just to get a warmer and rounder sound, I put a little extra air around my cheeks, and I try, especially when I'm playing soft, I try to see how with my embouchure I can warm up the sound a little more. Just check this out. Towards the end, I was starting to run out of air, and instantly I can feel my sound thinning out, right? So it's really important. You see, what I did is I just added extra air here, almost like a little reserve, just so that there's air everywhere. And a lot of things that I see on students is they start blowing more like aggressively, and their sound becomes harsh, but then they lack air support. So then it's a harshness that ends up sounding out of tune and sounding like thin, like more like. Right, so even if it sounds fat, especially the tenor will make many things sound fat, but it's harsh and metallic and thin. So you want to round up your sounds, whatever style you want to play. If you want to play jazz perfectly, even if you want to play more brighter things, there's nothing better that you can do than to add this depth to your sound so that you don't sound thinner. You can have a nice and round saxophone sound, because saxophone is such a gorgeous instrument with a lot of harmonics. You want to use them to your advantage, right? Use them and color that sound up, especially we're not in the classical world where the sound is a little more restricted. We're in jazz, contemporary styles where we want to shape our sound so that we really sound like, how we want to play, right? In the other video about adding depth to your sound, I show you a little Dexter Gordon technique and how you can start moving your jaw. Once you have good air support, that's the thing. When you have good air support, then you do vibrato, then you can start messing around with your embouchure and try a lot of things to add even more depth to your sound, which it's easier with a good airflow, right? If you try things up like this. Just by moving my jaw a little bit to the front, I instantly get this super round sound, but with a good air support. See, I get all of that additional nuance and control with my embouchure because of my good air support, right? So a few things embouchure wise, of course, when you do it with the neck and with the horn, avoid biting. If you're biting too much, then breathe better and relax more. Try to relax. At some point I started doing the double embouchure. I'll have to do another video about that, where you put your upper lips on top of your teeth, but you need to be careful on not biting. How do you know you're biting? Usually if you're biting, you will instantly sound sharp, and you would just naturally pay attention if you're grabbing, right? And the other problem might be that your lower lip is all over the place, hence making you sound even flat, right? Which happens to many people, like. I see that happening to. I never had that problem. I had the other one. I had the biting one. But the lower lip is a big problem as well, where I see in students, everything is sounding shaky and even flat. High notes and stuff like that are suffering from being flat. So if that's a problem, then you need to, maybe you're overly relaxing. You need a good air support, and this needs to be a cushion like a pillow. It cannot just be like something completely overly relaxed that you can't control the sound. So this embouchure has to be, like Jerry Bergonzi said it, the no embouchure embouchure. Just let it chill. Have a good airflow. Once the airflow is happening, then you can start messing around and see how you can shape your own sound, because we all have a different internal embouchure. That means that if I do something with my lower jaw, it's going to have a tiny different effect than yours. For instance, in my case, my lower jaw is really pushed in. So if I do this, it's going to affect my sound way more different than yours. It's going to affect my decisions for reeds, for tip openings, right? I use my Sios 9-star, my signature mouthpiece. Probably because of that, I need a little compensation. I sound better with it and I feel more comfortable with it. So these are things. When you have a good airflow and you start trying things out, this is when you start shaping your sound and taking better decisions for whatever gear you want to use and whatever mouthpiece you're going to use. And the better thing, once you do that, the actual saxophone won't, a lot of people get obsessed about the kind of horn and the sound. The sound is really you. For the listener, in the saxophone world, we get a little obsessed about, oh, that vintage sounds better. No, that modern one sounds like this. I do feel that, but for the regular listener, you sound like you. You don't sound like a Mark VI. You don't sound like a Yamaha. You sound like you, with little variations, right? Depending on the mouthpiece, the horn, but you really sound like you. Ultimately, that's what we want to do. And you know what? If the gear affects your sound that much, then you got to look at your playing, because that means that you don't have a sound yet, right? That's what I say. Is like, usually this is why a lot of students, when they change gear, and this happened to me when I was starting out. I would change gear and my sound would change super fast, and I would be excited because I thought it was the gear, right? Because I had not developed my sound. So if I grabbed an auto link for the metal mouthpiece for the first time, I was like, oh wow, that sounds so different. I had no sound, so of course it's gonna sound different. I didn't know what I was doing. But if you start working on your sound, I can mold everything to sound like me. And yes, there's gonna be differences, but really it's about this, to sound like you and to get around magnificent saxophone sound. Okay, so the last one I'm going to tell you a very, very amazing tip I learned from George Garzone, and I really enjoyed this one. And it's actually to add even more roundness to your sound, okay? And it's, once you have, now do this only when you have good air support and you're comfortable and you're a little more seasoned player. Don't do this if you're a beginner yet, because you might mess up your sound, okay? But once you feel comfortable with your breathing and everything, you can do this. And it's actually about flattening the note on purpose, right? Scooping into the sound, just so that you can see that balance between thickening your sound, flattening it, but not like that point where it's not flat anymore and it's just round. And it helped me a lot with the high notes. It sounds weird, but here's how it goes. I'm going to grab like a natural B and I'm going to scoop into that B. And by scooping it, I'm going to really try to make it as round as possible until it's going to start flat, but I'm going to scoop into it until it doesn't. Now the same to the D. This, by default, just instantly makes me play the note rounder. Now, the idea is for you to be able to do that without the scoop. Just train for that balance. When you do the scoop, you got to pay attention to that moment where naturally you're going to see the note opens up because you're overly relaxing. It's literally from completely over relaxing to gaining control, right? So you have this like pillow that is too soft, right? And it's like you're tightening it up a little bit, but just to the point where it's still soft and lets the sound be round, but you have control. So that's the point that I want you to train. It's going to make you sound so much rounder. Look. Now, if I just do it without the scoop. Dexter Gordon used to do that a lot. You would hear him on purpose doing. It instantly thickens your sound. Now you got to be careful doing it and ultimately get used to thickening your sound without necessarily doing the scoop. But the scoop will help you. It's almost like everything is totally loose, and then you're just tightening up a bit so that you get a nice lock and a nice control, but still a thick round sound, right? So again. See how I started taking away the scoop and now. So these are little things you can start working with your sound to add a gigantic amount of not only depth but roundness, right? Working on your airflow. Again, watch those videos. I left them here at the end of the video inside. Then working on your embouchure itself. Once you have a good airflow, what are you doing? Are you biting too much? Using the neck by itself, getting, in the case of a tenor, a concert E, in the alto is like an A flat concert, right? Getting it perfectly and getting it without shaking, with no tongue at all. Right? No tongue, because if you start everything with tongue and you get too used to that, you're never working on your sound. If you release the tongue, you're going to start working on your sound. Then you can put it back in and use it as an element of articulation rather than an element of just pushing the sound away, spitting the sound, right? This is why a lot of people have almost like a spitty sound on the saxophone, like overly pushed. And you want to work without it so that your sound sounds like round and nice, right? Then airflow, working, deciding what your problem is on your embouchure. If you're sounding thin and you already fixed your air support, you're probably biting or you're overly relaxing this, getting a good balance between tightening up and relaxing. How do you do that? Well, that last effect of actually scooping and bending the note on purpose, flattening it, tackling the note from below, which will sound a little weird at the beginning, but it will train you on what is the possibility of making that note sound as round as possible, right? If you flatten it out, that's like normally what's going to happen is you're going to overly relax and then you tighten a little bit just to make that note as round as possible. Then take that scoop away and try to do just that note plain, and you see how much rounder you will start sounding. Now, this is just one of the few things. Let me know in the comments if you like this video, what would you like to see next. Please make sure you watch my other videos about saxophone technique and sound. I want to make more like this. But if you like this, please make sure to subscribe. I post a new little video tutorial every single Tuesday. So thank you so much for watching. And if you want to take your saxophone skills and improvisation skills to the next level, I do have a very special, amazing, exclusive private community of saxophone players from all over the world that I want to invite you to join my Improv Mastery Circle. I've left a link below. There's a special link on the description, special offer for you for being part of my YouTube, where you can join my Improv Mastery Circle. There I'm sharing my entire step-by-step concept, my entire course. I update it constantly. You get all my materials. I do weekly posts. I do monthly live group coaching calls with every student. I post a replay. It's an amazing place where you can post your progress and you can get instant feedback, direct feedback from me, right? And direct feedback from people in the community. It's a great place to grow. It's way more than just a course. There is really an amazing community where you can grow as a musician. Now, there's a link also to just get my little course. If you want a one-time thing, you can go and check out my Jazz Improvisation Mastery System. It's a great step-by-step course. It's a kind of do-it-yourself kind of thing, but it will totally help you boost your playing and your improv skills to the next level. But go and check it out in the description, and thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, every Tuesday I post a video like this. I'll leave it in the comments what you want to see next. Thank you. Bye-bye.